If this video showed up for you, it's because this story is gonna move you and give you chills. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of story. And comment which city you're watching from. The hum of the airport was a constant, low-frequency vibration that most people eventually tuned out. But for Officer Mark Bennett, that noise was the backdrop of his life. It was a symphony of rolling luggage wheels, the hiss of espresso machines, the unintelligible announcements over the PA system, and the rhythmic thud of thousands of feet rushing toward departure gates. The air smelled of stale, recycled oxygen, jet fuel, and the faint, anxious sweat of travelers running late. But Mark wasn't relying on his own senses today. He was relying on the partner walking dutifully by his side, Rex. Rex was a German shepherd with a coat the color of burnt toast and eyes that held an intelligence far deeper than most humans gave him credit for. He wasn't just a dog. He was a precision instrument wrapped in fur and muscle. For 6 years, they had walked these terminals together. They moved as one entity, connected by a leather leash. Mark knew every tilt of his head, every twitch of his ear. They had found drugs wrapped in coffee grounds and explosives hidden in hollowed-out books, but nothing in their years of service could have prepared them for what was waiting in the shadows of Terminal 4. They were on a routine patrol, weaving through the crowded walkways. Mark adjusted his tactical vest, his eyes scanning the faces of the crowd. Tired businessmen, excited families, tearful couples saying goodbye. It was a Tuesday. Typically a slow day. Rex was calm, his gait steady, his tail relaxed. To the passers-by, he was a majestic animal, a symbol of safety. But to Mark, he was the only thing standing between order and chaos. They reached a quieter section of the terminal, near a row of vending machines and a janitor's closet that saw little traffic. That's when the rhythm changed. Rex stopped. It wasn't the aggressive, rigid stance he took when he smelled narcotics. It wasn't the sit-and-stare signal for explosives. This was different. Rex let out a low, vibrating whine that traveled up the leash and straight into Mark's hand. Mark looked down, frowning. "What is it, buddy? What do you see?" Rex pulled, not with aggression, but with an urgent desperation Mark had never felt before. He dragged Mark toward a corner obscured by a large potted plant. There, sitting alone against the cold concrete wall, was a suitcase. It was a hard-shell carry-on, navy blue, scuffed at the corners. It looked ordinary. It looked like something anyone could have forgotten while checking a text message. But to Rex, that blue box was screaming. Usually when a Canine detects a suspicious package, the protocol is absolute. Establish a perimeter, call the bomb squad, and wait. But Rex broke protocol. He didn't sit. He didn't wait. He lunged at the suitcase, clawing at the plastic shell, his whines escalating into frantic, high-pitched barks that echoed off the high ceiling. Passengers nearby stopped, their curiosity turning into immediate fear. A hush fell over the immediate area, creating a vacuum of silence in the bustling airport. "Rex, heel," Mark commanded, his voice sharp. But the dog ignored him. Rex was trembling, his nose pressed violently against the zipper of the bag. He looked back at Mark, his brown eyes wide with a terrifying clarity. He wasn't signaling a threat to the public. He was signaling a plea for help. Mark felt the cold shiver run down his spine, unrelated to the airport's air conditioning. The dog's behavior was erratic, terrifying. If it were a bomb, Rex would be stoic. This was panic. "Officer needs assistance at Gate 42, Mark radioed, his voice tight. "Possible 1089, but something is wrong." The security team began to cordon off the area, pushing the murmuring crowd back. The standard procedure shouted, "Don't touch it," but looking at Rex, who was now scratching at the floor tiles trying to get under the bag, Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The dog wasn't trying to protect Mark from an explosion. He was trying to get in. Mark knelt, his hand hovering over his holster, his other hand reaching out to calm his partner. "Rex, easy, show me." Rex nudged Mark's hand with his wet nose, then nudged the zipper. He let out a sound that broke Mark's heart, a sound of pure distress. It was then that Mark made a decision that could cost him his badge Or perhaps his life. He trusted the dog more than the manual. He realized that whatever was inside that blue shell wasn't ticking. "Stand back," Mark yelled to the few lingering onlookers. His hands shaking slightly, Mark reached for the zipper. The metal felt ice cold against his fingertips. The world seemed to slow down, the background noise fading into a dull roar. Rex stopped barking and watched, his body rigid, waiting. Mark pulled the zipper. The sound of the teeth separating was the loudest thing in the terminal. He expected wires. He expected drugs. He expected the worst. But as the lid of the suitcase fell open, the air left Mark's lungs in a violent rush. The crowd behind the tape gasped in unison, a collective sound of horror that would haunt Mark for the rest of his days.
Inside the bag, tucked amidst cheap clothing used as padding, was a child, a little girl, no older than 2. Her blonde curls were matted with sweat, and her tiny knees were pulled up to her chest. She looked like a broken doll discarded in the trash. But the terrifying part wasn't her position. It was her color. Her skin was a translucent, ghostly blue, and her chest was terrifyingly still. Mark dropped to his knees, his training kicking in through the shock. "Medic! I need a medic now!" he screamed, his voice cracking with an emotion police officers aren't supposed to show. He reached in, his large hands trembling as he lifted the fragile weight. She was limp, cold. Rex whined, a high-pitched keen, and nudged the girl's dangling hand with his wet nose. It was as if he was trying to will the life back into her. And then, a miracle. At the touch of the dog's cold nose, a tiny, ragged gasp escaped the girl's blue lips. It was faint, like the sound of dry leaves scraping together, but it was the most beautiful sound Mark had ever heard. "Stay with us, sweetheart! Stay with us!" Mark whispered as he cradled her against his chest as the paramedics broke through the crowd. They worked with frantic precision, placing an oxygen mask over a face so small it nearly covered her entire head. As they rushed the stretcher toward the ambulance, Rex refused to heal. He trotted alongside the gurney, his eyes locked on the child he had just saved. He knew his job wasn't done yet. At the hospital, the diagnosis was grim. The doctors said it was a matter of minutes. Oxygen deprivation, severe dehydration, and shock. If that dog hadn't found her when he did, we would be calling the Morgan, not the ICU. Mark looked down at Rex, who was lying by the waiting room door, his head on his paws, watching the entrance. He wasn't resting. He was guarding. While little Lily fought for her life, a different kind of fight began in the security room. Mark, fueled by a cold, simmering rage, reviewed the CCTV footage with the airport's head of security. They rewound the tapes to an hour before the discovery. And there she was, a woman in a gray oversized hoodie, her face obscured by shadows and large sunglasses. She walked with a chilling purpose. She didn't look like a confused traveler. She looked like a predator. She wheeled the blue suitcase near the vending machines, checked her watch, and simply let go of the handle. She didn't look back. She didn't hesitate. She walked away, leaving a child to suffocate in the dark, as casually as if she were discarding a coffee cup. "Run facial rec on the exit cameras," Mark ordered, his voice made of steel. The system whirred, matching partial features from when she briefly lifted her head to check a departure screen. The match came back with a ding that sounded like a gavel falling in a courtroom. Rebecca Mills. The name didn't ring a bell until the background check populated. She wasn't a stranger. She was the girl's aunt, the sister of Lily's mother. The report detailed a bitter, venomous custody battle, fueled by Rebecca's instability and pathological jealousy of her sister's happiness. This wasn't a ransom kidnapping. It was an act of pure spite. She didn't want the child. She just wanted the child gone. She planned to board a flight to Mexico, leaving Lily behind as nothing more than lost luggage. "She's booked on flight 304, the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Boarding in 20 minutes. "She's not getting on that plane," Mark growled as he clipped the leash back onto Rex's collar. Rex stood up instantly, sensing the shift in Mark's energy. The sadness in the room evaporated, replaced by the electric tension of the hunt. Rex bared his teeth slightly, a low rumble starting in his chest. He had smelled the scent of the woman on the suitcase. He knew exactly who we were looking for.
Let's go get her, boy.
They didn't head for the gate. The flight was delayed. Intelligence suggested she had retreated to the parking garage to wait it out, likely realizing the police presence in the terminal had spiked. Mark and Rex burst through the doors into the dimly lit concrete cavern of the parking structure. The air here was thick with exhaust fumes and silence. It was a maze of concrete pillars and shadows, the perfect place for a monster to hide. But she had forgotten one thing. You can hide from a camera, you can hide from a cop, but you cannot hide from a nose that can smell fear from a mile away.
"Seek," Mark whispered. It was the only command Rex needed. The dog moved with a fluid, predatory grace, his nose skimming the oil-stained concrete. The garage was a tomb of silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside and the rhythmic panting of the dog. Every shadow looked like a hiding place. Every parked car was a potential ambush. Mark drew his weapon, keeping it low. The air here tasted of gasoline and stale fear. They moved up to the third level. Rex suddenly stopped near a concrete pillar, his ears swiveling forward. He didn't bark. He froze, his body pointing like an arrow toward a silver sedan parked in the darkest corner of the lot. Inside the vehicle, a silhouette moved. The faint glow of a cell phone screen illuminated a face, sharp, angry, impatient. Rebecca. She was frantically typing on her phone, likely checking flight statuses or deleting evidence. She had no idea that the very creature she had underestimated, a dumb animal, as she probably thought, was about to seal her fate. Mark signaled Rex to hold. He crept closer, using the adjacent cars as cover until he was just 10 feet away. "Police, show me your hands!" Mark's voice boomed, shattering the silence. Rebecca jumped, the phone clattering from her hand. Panic, raw and ugly, twisted her features. She fumbled for the door handle, scrambling to get out, perhaps to run, perhaps to fight. But she wasn't fast enough. "Watch him," Mark shouted, the command releasing Rex like a coiled spring. Rex didn't attack to maul, he attacked to control. He launched himself through the air, a blur of fur and muscle, slamming into the car door just as Rebecca tried to open it, pinning it against her legs. She screamed, not in pain, but in sheer terror at the sight of the snarling beast inches from her face. Rex stood his ground, barking with a ferocity that shook the very air in the garage. He wasn't biting, but his message was clear. Move one muscle and see what happens. "Get on the ground, now!" Mark moved in, cuffing her hands behind her back before she could process what had happened. As the cold metal clicked shut, Rebecca slumped against the car, sobbing, not tears of remorse, but tears of a plan foiled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she mumbled. "I just wanted her gone." Mark looked down at her with a disgust he struggled to hide. "She's a child, Rebecca, not a piece of luggage." With the suspect secured in the back of a squad unit, the sirens that followed weren't for the chase, but for the victory lap back to the place where it really mattered, the hospital. When Mark and Rex walked into the pediatric ICU hours later, the atmosphere was different. The silence wasn't heavy, it was reverent. In the center of the room, surrounded by beeping monitors, sat a woman named Emily. She looked as if she hadn't slept in a decade. Her eyes were red, swollen, and fixed entirely on the small figure in the bed. Lily was awake. Weak, pale, but awake. When Emily saw Mark, she stood up, her hands trembling. She didn't know what to say. How do you thank the man who gave you your life back? But then she looked down. She saw Rex, sitting quietly by Mark's side, his tail giving a tentative, slow wag. "Is this him?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Is this the hero?" Mark nodded, a lump forming in his own throat. "He knew, Emily. Even when we didn't. He knew." Emily dropped to her knees right there on the hospital floor, ignoring the doctors, ignoring the dirt. She wrapped her arms around Rex's thick neck, burying her face in his fur. And Rex, the tactical canine who had just taken down a felon in a parking garage, melted. He leaned his heavy head against her shoulder, closing his eyes, letting out a soft, contented sigh. He licked the tears from her cheek, gentle as a whisper. In that moment, he wasn't a police officer. He wasn't a weapon. He was a savior. Lily turned her head on the pillow, her small voice breaking the silence. "Puppy?" The room dissolved in tears and laughter. the sound of relief washing away the horror of the day. This story isn't just about a crime. It's about the instincts that connect us. It's about the fact that sometimes help comes in forms we don't expect. Rebecca saw Lily as a burden to be discarded in a suitcase. Rex saw a life that needed saving. In a world full of noise, distraction, and cruelty, it was a dog who listened to the silence and heard a cry for help. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that dogs are truly angels with tails, leave a like on this video and share it with someone you love. You never know who needs to be reminded that there are still heroes watching over us. Until the next story.